Hello, my name is Stephen Boyer. I'm with the Secondary Social Studies Masters of Arts in Teaching program at NC State University. In this webinar, I will be discussing a book entitled Discipline in the Secondary Classroom, A Positive Approach to Behavior Management. This book was written by Randall S. Sprick, who is a scholar on the issue. I particularly enjoyed this book because it reinforces a lot of the things that I have learned thus far at NC State, as well as reinforces the things I have learned in the classroom during my first professional semester at Cary High School. The central premise of this book is that it is designed to help teachers manage student behavior and increase motivation using the discipline in the secondary classroom approach, which is an approach that is proactive, positive, and instructional. In being proactive, it means it focuses on prevention rather than correction. You want to use clear expectations and fostering a respectful climate in your classroom to prevent misbehavior, so you're spending much less time correcting it. If you're an effective behavior manager in your classroom, having a great prevention plan will significantly decrease your need to correct misbehavior in the future. It won't erase it, but it'll significantly decrease that need. Next, you want to be positive. This approach is positive, meaning that it builds collaborative relationships and provides meaningful feedback to students. You want to build a relationship of respect with your students, mutual trust. You want students to recognize that you are looking out for their best interests in the class and you are interested in their success. You want them to succeed, and you want to provide meaningful feedback to students. That includes positive feedback as well as feedback that helps them academically as well as meeting behavioral goals in growing up throughout school. As this is a book about secondary classrooms, students are making that jump to adulthood in this time period, so it is very important to get that kind of feedback on growing up. Lastly, it is an approach that is instructional. You are teaching and reviewing your expectations, meaning that you're not just teaching the expectations the first day and not talking about them at all for the rest of the semester. You want to review these expectations when needed and possibly reteach them, as well as teach replacement behaviors in the event of certain student misbehaviors, so that a student has an avenue to achieve positive effects, positive reinforcement in the future. There are 5 main points of this book. It all follows what is known as the Stoic model. The first part in the Stoic model is the S, which is structure your classroom for success. Then T, teach expectations. O, observe student behavior. I, interact positively. And C, correct misbehavior fluently. That one's important. All right, for the S, structure your classroom for success. You want to structure and organize all settings to prompt responsible student behavior. This mostly refers to the physical attributes of your classroom, such as the location of your desk. You want your desk to be in a place that's accessible for students and a focal point of the room, as well as a place where you can observe student behavior and observe student engagement. That doesn't mean that you need to be at your desk the whole class. You should be up and moving around your classroom. You shouldn't be hiding at your desk. But when you are at your desk, you want to be in a position where you can observe your students. You want meaningful student desk arrangement. That doesn't only mean that the desks are arranged in a practical way in terms of student movement, but they're also arranged in a way that promotes the structure in your classroom, such as if you are doing a lot of group work, you want possibly desks arranged in clusters so that students can engage in this group work easily. Or if your class uses a lot of discussion, like whole class discussion, maybe a hemisphere formation or a U shape of student desks. Or lastly, if your class uses a lot of work at the board or PowerPoints or videos, you want those desks in rows facing forward so that all student attention is at the front of the room. Next, for your location of classroom materials, you want classroom materials to be in a practical place in your classroom where students can get to them easily and where that they aren't causing disruptions when they have to get up and go get, a red pen to do quiz corrections or something like that. You want these materials to be in a place where students see that they are open and available for use. Next, I've talked about this a little bit already, but ease of movement for students and the teacher. You want to make sure that you can get around the classroom as a teacher and engage with your students and observe your students. You don't want to have to hop over book bags and desks and chairs to get where you need to go. This as well goes for students. You don't want students to have to hop over desks to get where they need to go. It makes the classroom much more efficient, as well as minimizes disruptions for, say, if a student needs to get up and use the restroom. They're not hopping over other students' things to get out of the room. Lastly, this also significantly impacts the efficiency of your classroom in terms of an evacuation situation such as a fire alarm where students need to get out of the classroom in an orderly and quick manner. You want this ease of movement in your classroom. Last, you want to foster an appropriate classroom climate. This goes a lot for decorating. You want to make sure your classroom is a professional and inviting setting. You don't want it to be overbearing to where it's intimidating students, but you want it to be a place where it is clear that it is a setting for learning and that students will feel welcome and motivated in. So it all goes back to decorating. Yay! All right, next, for the T in the Stoic model, you want to teach expectations. You want to teach and reteach these expectations on how to behave responsibly in the setting you've created. First, you want to decide on a few core rules for the class, preferably broadly stated rules because you don't want any more than 10 rules. Sprick says somewhere around 6 is a great number, so you want those rules to be broad so they cover a lot of things, such as a rule such as be respectful. Next, you want to state rules positively. As an example, be respectful, not don't be disrespectful. You want to give the students an avenue to meet those expectations. You don't want to come off from the get-go saying, don't do this, don't do that. You want to say, this is what I expect. State them positively, positive behaviors, not talking about negative behaviors here. Next, you want to create a clear syllabus and be prepared to cover it. You want your syllabus to cover everything it needs to cover, yet be clear and concise, and be prepared to talk about it on your first day. Not necessarily ad nauseum here, but you really want to make your expectations clear, and a syllabus is a great tool because it's something that students can go back to time and time again. A lot of times now they're electronic. You can put them on Blackboard so students can access them straight from their smartphones. It's a great avenue to take, and it's a very important part of communicating your expectations. This goes along with the syllabus and the last point here, teaching and reviewing your expectations over the course of the first few weeks. You definitely want to teach your expectations from day one, but Sprick also mentions reviewing your expectations over the course of a few weeks, gradually phasing out this time for review so that your students learn these expectations well and are comfortable with meeting these expectations in the course. Next, you want to observe student behavior. You want to make sure they're meeting your expectations. That includes circulating and visibly scanning the room. You don't want to hide at your desk. And you want to collect and analyze meaningful data. In the long term, this data will help you if you're trying to critique your management style. You want to learn what works, what doesn't work. Pay attention to certain chronic behaviors in your classroom and see if there's a way that you can kind of stifle that, kind of curtail those issues in your classroom. Next, you want to interact positively. You want to provide frequent non-contingent attention to build relationships. That means getting to know your students. You want your students to feel comfortable around you. You want to put forth an environment of respect. You want your students to recognize that you are looking out for their best interest and that you are interested in their success in your class. You want to give frequent age-appropriate positive feedback. Seeing as this is a book for the secondary classroom, you don't want to give feedback such as, oh, good job, you're so smart. You want to give feedback such as, I really enjoyed this essay that you wrote. I felt that your argument was strong. I would like to see more work like this in the future. Good job. Something a little more mature is great positive feedback for a student. Next, you want to acknowledge their efforts to be successful. This goes back to that example of complimenting the student's efforts on an essay. You want to let the student know that you recognize that they are trying to be successful in your course and that they are striving to be successful, and support that motivation so they can continue that motivation in their future schoolwork. Lastly, the C in the Stoic model, like I said earlier, this is very important. You want to correct misbehavior fluently. And that should be, to be fluent, you want your corrections to be carried out in a few ways. First, you should be calm. You want to try to keep from losing your temper. If it's something that gets you, try to detach yourself from the situation. You don't want to meet a student's aggression with more aggression. You want to be consistent with your consequences. If one student has a phone out one day and you take it away, the very next day you don't want to have another student with his phone out and all you do is tell them to put it away. You want to keep your consequences consistent across your classroom. You don't want that to break down. Third, you want to correct behavior immediately if at all possible. You don't want to wait till after class to go up to a student and comment on something a misbehavior that needs to be corrected. You want to make sure that while it is in the heat of the moment, you want to get in there and correct that misbehavior. And when doing that, you want to also be brief. You don't want to go on and on and on about why it is important to exhibit a positive behavior. You want to be clear, concise, and so that all goes into being brief. You want to be respectful too. You don't want to, you know, put the student down personally. You want to talk about the misbehavior as what it is, a misbehavior. You don't want to correct a student by saying, "Why can't you be more civil in class?" You want to say, "I would really appreciate it if you showed a little more respect to students around you." Something, positively. You don't want to show disrespect to a student. And lastly, as much as possible, you want to be private. You don't want to call a student out in front of class. That disrupts class. It creates awkward situations for other students. You don't want to do that, and it also creates an awkward situation for the student whose behavior you're trying to address. You don't want them to feel like you are calling them out and embarrassing them. You want to be discreet and private, respectful, brief, and calm when you do all this. All right, two ideas or strategies you want to take into account. Um, these are both things I've discussed a little bit earlier, but I'm going to go a little bit more in depth here. You want to take into account class structure and demographics when deciding seating arrangement and student placement. I already talked about deciding seating arrangement in terms of what type of class structure you're going to have, i.e., group work, paired work, discussions, individual student work. But you also want to decide in student placement if you're going to place students in alphabetical order or let them choose their own seats, or if you want to place, if you're in a classroom that's mixed between high achieving and low achieving students, you may want to place students mixed up so that high achieving students can support low achieving students in paired or group activities. It's great to see, a low achieving student, you know, clear these high hurdles in learning because they have support of a peer. Also, the next thing to keep in mind when correcting misbehavior fluently is you want to make sure that it is valid and that it changes the future occurrence of the behavior. You don't want to just stop it now. You want the future behaviors to stop as well. You don't want to disrupt other students. I already got into that a little bit earlier. You don't want to create an awkward situation in the classroom. You want to treat the misbehaving student with dignity and respect. And here, these two are very important in the end. You don't want to reduce the student's motivation to exhibit positive behavior. This goes along with the ineffective and overuse of punishment. You don't want the student to retreat from participating in class. You don't want the student to hide from you, and you don't want the student to stop participating because he feels that you're out to get him. This goes into the last part too. You don't want to jeopardize the established positive relationship between you and the student. You strive so hard to establish, under the I in the Stoic model, to interact positively, to establish this positive relationship. Don't intervene in a behavior in a way that jeopardizes this relationship. You want the student to come out of the experience knowing that you still care about their success and believe that they can succeed in your course. Lastly, a favorite passage I have, it's a fundamental question to consider when regarding correcting behavior. The quote is, "What is the purpose behind correction, and what do you hope to accomplish by giving a corrective consequence?" You want to know what you are doing going into giving a consequence to an action. You don't want to correct as a result of frustration or anger or desire to just get rid of the student. The buck stops here. You want to correct the behavior. You don't want to just get rid of the problem. You don't want to treat the symptom. You want to get to the cause. Lastly, you want to strive to correct the behavior fluently for the sake of the student as well as for his or her classmates. You want to get this behavior fixed so that the student himself or herself is more successful, and also so that the class as a whole is more successful because this disruption is minimized. These problems are taken care of in your class so that you can continue engaging the content in the academic portion of the class. Thank you very much for listening to this webinar. Again, my name is Stephen Boyer, and if you're interested in this book, it is called Discipline in the Secondary Classroom, A Positive Approach to Behavioral Management by Randall S. Sprick. Again, thank you for listening.